So Tna Impact took place once again in Manchester, England. The show starts with Dixieland backstage. Magnus wants Dixie to assure him that an unknown someone has agreed to her plan. He continues to sound unsure, and she reminds him that he shouldn't feel that way about her because she led him to the title. Dixie wants Magnus to be her mouthpiece and express her unwillingness to give up control of TNA to the crowd. Magnus tells her that if she falls from power, he's going to stay above the descent. He calls out to Ethan, but Ethan ignores him. Magnus repeats, and after Ethan reluctantly acknowledges him, Magnus tells him that despite the personal shit between them, they have to work together or Dixieland will go down. Ethan understands and they shake hands. Magnus tells Rockstar Dud to prevent the American Wolves from coming to the ring. So then we see Magnus and Dixie Carter come to the ring. Magnus immediately calls out Montel Porter and he comes out. Magnus tells Porter who he is and what he is. He says that he couldn't care less about Porter spending time in the hole and that his jail tenure would be pleasant compared to being in the ring with him. Magnus tells Porter that he's going to give a message that puts the tail between the legs, but informs him that his money won't stop him from whipping some ass. Porter tells Magnus that a real champion doesn't have to keep telling the fans that he is one because they would know it. He says that he wants to know if the Lethal Lockdown match at Lockdown for control of the wrestling side of the company is going to happen or not. Magnus tells Porter that Dixieland will go up against his team, but he says that he won't be in the match because he will be defending the title against Samoa Joe, meaning that Gunner will fall to him later. Porter wonders why Magnus would take Gunner so lightly, and Magnus tells him that whether it's Gunner or it's him, he's going to make Porter his Jezebel. Porter slugs Magnus and goes off on him with kicks and punches in the corner. Ethan Carter III comes out, running to the ring, and hits Porter from behind. As Magnus and Ethan double team Porter, we see the American Wolves backstage being held back by two members of Dixie's Goon Squad, courtesy of Rockstar Dud. Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards overpower the security doofs and throw Dud into an equipment case before taking off. Gunner comes running to the ring, causing Magnus and Ethan to flee. Porter invites them back into the ring, but they don't see the American Wolves approaching from behind. Magnus turns, sees them, and quickly sidesteps them as he heads to the back, leaving Ethan alone. Ethan charges, but Edwards grabs him, allowing Richards to give Ethan a spin kick. He goes down, and Richards and Edwards join Porter and Gunner in the ring. Solid segment that had an interesting exchange between Magnus and Porter, and that was mainly because Dixie kept her mouth shut and didn't insert herself with unnecessary words. Magnus is coming off solid on the mic, accompanied by good heat, but he should be presented more as a confident champion. One moment he's talking tough to Montel Porter, then he sidesteps the American Wolves like a pussy as he deserts Ethan. I understand Magnus ditching Ethan, but it should have been done in a way that shows that he still has balls. So then we see Robert Roode walking through a door backstage. Roode is asked about rumblings concerning his future in the company. He says that he'll say what he needs to say and everyone will hear. So then we see Ethan Carter III burst through the dressing room door and yell at Magnus, wanting to know why he left him. Magnus brushes him off as if it's not a concern to him at all. Ethan wants to know why he should be loyal to Magnus, and Magnus tells him that he owes it to Dixieland to be a do-boy and do what needs to be done for the group. Ethan mockingly supports him and leaves. With the way Magnus continues to berate Ethan about doing it for Dixie and for him, how long does Ethan keep on being a bitch for Magnus in order to please Dixie? So then we see Samoa Joe in the ring. Joe says that he'll get it on with the winner between Magnus and Gunner at Lockdown, but he wants to bash somebody's head now. He calls out anyone from Dixieland to come down. Then we see the glorified jobbers and Zema Ion come to the ring. Joe wants to know which one of them wants to get his ass kicked. Then he decides that he'll kick 3 asses. So then we have Samoa Joe versus the glorified jobbers and Zema Ion. Okay match. The match ends with Joe taking hold of the jobbers and executing a combination of a Russian leg sweep on Robbie E and a DDT on Mr. Duh. Then Samoa Joe comes off the ropes and hits the jobbers with a suicide dive. Joe delivers a chop to Ion in the corner. He lifts Ion onto the top turnbuckle and attempts the muscle buster, but Ion rakes the eyes. He tries to execute the tornado DDT on Joe, but Joe throws him off. Ion lands on his feet and charges Joe, but Joe catches him with a Uranagi. He lifts Ion back onto the top turnbuckle, and this time he executes the muscle buster. Joe locks in the rear naked choke, and Ion submits. The winner of the match, Samoa Joe. Even though TNA made an error in not showing Joe's entrance, since this is the guy that they are building for Lockdown, this not quite but should have been squash match was all about continuing the momentum toward his title match, and that's it. The only scenario that can be imagined in which the World Tag Team Champions lose in a 3-on-1 match is when the champions are the glorified jobbers. TNA Creative put the belts on these two because they saw it as a joke that was only funny to them. But they know that they made a mistake, and hopefully it will be a short amount of time before the belts are in the possession of a real tag team. So then we see Christy Hemme backstage with a stagey who replaces her faulty battery pack. She leaves and Sam Shaw appears in the background. He comes up behind the stagey and chin locks him. Shaw drags him and throws him into an equipment case. Then he runs the guy into a garage door and kicks him. Shaw walks back and picks up the battery pack that Christy previously had and holds it. So then we see Robert Roode and James Storm backstage. Roode tells Storm that they became wrestlers for the natural highs that the art gives them, but he says that wrestling can eventually wear one down. Roode says that because of his refusal to trust, he distanced himself from his fellow workers. He tells Storm that when they were a team, they had their peaks and valleys, and he blames himself for those valleys. Roode says that he can't undo the damage, but he acknowledges that what they did as Beer Money was something that can't be duplicated. He says that Storm is the only one that he can depend on. Storm tells Roode that if he's going to give up, he shouldn't, because he can deal with the negatives of the business, particularly dealing with difficult management. He tells Roode that he controls how he deals with those negatives, not anyone else. They hug and Roode leaves. Possible hint at a Beer Money reunion, but it would likely be a one-time occurrence, not a permanent deal as some would like. So then we see Montel Porter on the phone backstage in the divided room. Austin Aries enters and has a seat across from Porter on the other side of the yellow line. Porter tells Aries that he wants him to be on his team for the Lethal Lockdown match. And Aries wants to know what he will get out of this. Porter promises that when he has complete control of the company, his changes will benefit everyone. Aries says that he's been pissed on by the upper level heads in the past and that he has heard the same static before about people looking out for him. Porter says that he can't erase what happened before, but he can do the right things when his team wins. And Aries says that he'll let his brain process the offer and leaves. And hopefully Aries will be a part of this match because the guy's a main eventer and he deserves the spot. So then we see a video segment featuring the TNA talent talking about being in the UK. Then we see some jerky video footage of Gail Kim and Madison Rayne battling on the floor backstage until they are separated. So then we have the women's match, a non-title street fight. Gail Kim versus Madison Rayne. Okay match. The match ends with Gail applying the figure 4 leg lock on Madison around the ring post. She releases the hold and grabs a chair. Gail attempts to hit Madison's leg, but Madison pulls it away. As Gail makes another attempt, Madison kicks the chair, which collides with Gail's face. Madison throws Gail into the ring and spears her. Sort of. Tapa comes into the ring. Madison charges her and hits her in the midsection with a small tray. She grabs the pseudo kendo stick. Tapa charges, Madison ducks and hits her in the back with the stick. Madison then picks up the chair and prepares to slam Tapa, but Gail hits her from behind with the Women's Championship belt. She pins Madison for the 3. The winner of the match, Gail Kim. One thing that TNA needs to do is that they have to clearly distinguish what happens during gimmick matches and determine whether they have no rules or rules and act accordingly. During this match, Tapa was free to interfere in the supposed one-on-one and the referee allowed it. However, when Gail had Madison in the figure 4 on the outside, the referee gave Gail a 5 count as if there were supposed to be rules. Consistency with gimmick matches is needed. Gail's bloody nose is just another sign of the sacrifice that she puts herself through as the nucleus. And that's why TNA has no other logical choice but to put the belt back on her. Madison is the women's champion, but she hasn't been showcased at all. And with the recently signed Santana Garrett and the likely to be signed Shauna providing potential fresh challenges for Gail as faces, the only sensible thing to do is to have Gail win the title at Lockdown. So then we see Mr. Anderson and Christy Hemme backstage. Anderson shows Christy photos of his infant twins on his phone. Sam Shaw appears in the foreground and sees them. He turns and walks off with a pissed look on his face. So, Anderson appears to be the one who will eventually save Christy from Shaw. Now, we wait for the confirmation. So then we see a video segment featuring Gunner. There is commentary from his parents and his wife talking about his aspirations of being a top-level wrestler. And there are images from his military days. Gunner appears and talks about having to wrestle for little pay, if any, something that Magnus wouldn't understand, noting that being recognized as the number 1 guy in wrestling is more important than raking in dollars. TNA did a good job in building up the interest in Gunner for the title match. And this video will be looked at as being the launching point for a long-term, bona fide face run for him. So then we see Ethan Carter III backstage. Ethan is asked to be specifically clear about his talking of ending Kurt Angle's career. Ethan puts Angle over as the best ever and says that he will not interfere with Angle's Hall of Fame induction, but only because he chooses to do so, in praise of Angle. Ethan is serving the psychological sauce, but no one will consume it. We know he will be evading Angle's Hall of Fame induction, but what will he do? And how will Angle react? So then we see James, Storm, and Gunner backstage. Storm recalls when he had the chance to become world champion and accomplish that goal. He tells Gunner that all the effort he has put forth for this title match will result in the same thing happening. Gunner says that he wants his title victory to mean more for his fellow Marines than for himself. But Storm tells him that he should let the moment be about him, because nothing compares to being world champion. Gunner gives Storm his World Tag Team title shot briefcase and says that after he becomes the new champion, they're going to become the tag team champions again. They hug and Storm leaves. It was very interesting to see Gunner give Storm the tag team title shot briefcase. Could it have been telegraphing? Possibly. Why would Gunner give the case to Storm unless Gunner was going to lose because. Did I say possibly? So then we see Robert Roode come to the ring. Roode says that he has great appreciation for being in TNA and that he is extremely thankful to be doing what he does for a living for as long as he has. He says that he has crapped on other wrestlers and he's ashamed of that. Roode says that the past is the past, but he can dictate what happens in his future. He says that he's quitting. Roode says that he can't stand the man that he's become, and that having to deal with Dixie Carter's garbage has driven him into the wall. Roode gives the fans a sign off and prepares to leave, but Dixie Carter comes to the ring. As she approaches, Dixie tells Roode that it's not up to him to quit when he chooses, because he's still professionally committed to the company. She says that he can go when she says so. As Dixie steps through the ropes, Roode tells her that he's finished. She says that he has to stay with Dixieland. Roode tells her that he's only good for making sure that Magnus keeps the title. Dixie tries to apologize, but Roode doesn't want to hear it. She emphasizes the importance of the Lethal Lockdown match, what's at stake, and what it means as far as her status of power in the company. Dixie says that she needs a captain for the team and she wants Roode. Roode wants to know why he would do that after she's pissed on him. Dixie offers him 10% ownership equity of TNA if Dixieland wins, and he accepts. But Roode warns her that he will make hell look like a paradise if she does him wrong again. The feeling here is that Roode will screw Dixie over, whether Dixieland wins or loses, because there's too much anger and resentment in him toward Dixie. If Dixieland loses, Roode will blame Dixie and go after her. If Dixieland wins, Roode will likely use his part owner juice however he can to undermine her. Dixie's desperation has become Roode's treasure. So then we see Jeremy Borash backstage with Bad Bones, the online winner of Gut Check. But we also see Mr. Anderson and Christy Hemme in the background still looking at Anderson's infant twins on his phone. Bones barely gets 3 seconds on the mic when Sam Shaw comes into the shot and hits Anderson from behind. The force of the blow knocks Anderson into Christy. She hits the garage door and goes down. Shaw throws Anderson into the garage door, then picks up Christy and carries her away. I don't understand why Borash and Bones were a part of the segment, because then the question becomes obvious. Why didn't Bones or anyone else stop Shaw from carrying Christy away? If Bones and Borash are not there, then the wrestling logic stays intact. And the segment wasn't fair to Bones. Why would TNA attempt to introduce him to viewers and then cut him off if the intention was to focus on what was happening behind him? Nevertheless, we now have the confirmation. Mr. Anderson will be Christie's rescuer. So then we see the Extraordinary Gentlemen's Organization backstage. Christopher Daniels and Kazarian are excited about Robert Roode's opportunity to become a part owner of TNA, and they want to be on Dixieland's team. However, Roode says that as easily as he could pick his boys to join him in the Lethal Lockdown match, they have to earn their way onto the team. He leaves, and Bad Influence are left confused. Even though he hasn't acquired his 10% yet, Roode seems to be testing out his potential power. Instead of being a friend and giving a quick yes to his fellow gentlemen, he acts in a managerial capacity and tells them to prove themselves to him. So then we had the jack-off match. The American Wolves versus Bad Influence. Good match, despite the short amount of time given. The match ends with Daniels and Kazarian double teaming Davey Richards with kicks. Kazarian tags Daniels back in and they whip Richards off the ropes, but Richards grabs Kazarian and pushes him into Daniels. Richards catches Kazarian with an enziguri and makes the tag to Eddie Edwards. Edwards comes into the ring and hits both Daniels and Kazarian with blows. He whips Daniels off the ropes, but Daniels reverses the whip. However, Edwards catches Kazarian with a kick that sends him off the ring apron onto the floor. Edwards sends Daniels into the corner with a couple of chops and then hits him with machine gun chop fest extraordinaire. He whips Daniels into the opposite corner and charges, but Edwards runs into a boot. Daniels jumps up to the top turnbuckle, but Edwards hits him with an enziguri. He lifts Daniels onto his back and executes a piggyback stunner. Edwards goes for the pin, but Kazarian makes the save. Richards throws Kazarian out of the ring, but Daniels hits him from behind. Daniels picks up Edwards and delivers a side slam, then goes to the top rope and comes off with a moonsault. Edwards moves out of the way, but Daniels lands on his feet. He kicks Edwards in the midsection, and as Richards re-enters the ring, Daniels comes off the ropes. But the American Wolves execute the alarm clock. As Edwards goes to the top rope, Richards kicks Kazarian off the ring apron. Edwards comes off with a double foot stomp to Daniels' back, which knocks him down to the mat. Richards howls and comes off the top rope from the opposite corner and double foot stomps Daniels. Edwards pins Daniels for the 3. The winners of the match, the American Wolves. This match should have been 10 minutes longer, but it was a small sample of a potentially exciting program of which TNA needs to take advantage. That's why it's imperative that the company keeps Bad Influence intact. They have to find a way to make that deal. These are the 2 perfect teams to rebuild the tag team division around. This is a golden egg that TNA can't afford to drop. So then we see Sam Shaw carry Christy Hemme into a room and place her on a table. He grabs her hand and attempts to kiss her, but she awakens. She is disoriented, wondering what happened, and wondering where Anderson is. He comforts her and then sees the cameraman and the segment ends. The segment should have ended with Shaw closing the door, which would have created interesting speculation about what may or may not have happened in that room. So then we see another video segment with Jeff Willow. Willow. No back and forth, TNA. So then we see a video segment featuring Magnus. Magnus talks about playing sports when he was a teen and not feeling the team concept. instead choosing to focus on individualism. He says that despite his critics, he is a credible champion and that his association with Dixie Carter only enhances his role as the face of TNA. Magnus says that what separates him from Gunner is that Gunner is just a guy, but he is the guy. So then we have the World Heavyweight Championship match. Magnus versus Gunner. Solid match. Now, before the match begins, we find out that there is a stipulation. Magnus rules, meaning no disqualification, no countout. During the match, Magnus calls for his Dixieland stablemates to come down, but James Storm and the American Wolves come down in order to prevent any interference. Later in the match, Ethan Carter III and the Glorified Jobbers come down and engage with Storm, Richards, and Edwards, and it appears that another fuckfest is on. But there was no direct effect on either Magnus or Gunner, so fuckfest avoided. The match ends with Magnus sending Gunner's head into the top turnbuckle, which ignites Gunner's head-bashing psych-up. Gunner hits Magnus with a couple of punches and comes off the ropes with a couple of sledges. He headbutts Magnus, comes out of the corner, and smashes him in the opposite corner. Gunner executes a slingshot suplex and follows that with a side slam takedown. He goes to the top rope, but Rockstar Dud runs into the ring and blocks him. Storm comes into the ring and throws Dud out. Gunner comes off the rope, but Storm catches him with the super kick. As Storm gets into his catcher's stance, Magnus crawls to Gunner and pins him for the 3. The winner of the match, Magnus. Show ends. The Storm Gunner program finally begins. But not only is there the hatred of jealousy of one man toward the other, but the World Tag Team title briefcase now becomes the source of further questions. Does Storm keep the case that Gunner gave him? Does the case go back to Gunner because it technically still belongs to him? Who will eventually get that tag team title shot? As the answers will soon come to those questions, the questions continue for Magnus. Why is every title match accompanied with a no DQ stipulation? Why is there a fuckfest or near fuckfest with every title match? Why must Magnus need help to remain the champion in every title match? Even if we wonder why, one thing is clear. Those questions can go away. When? March 9th. Win or lose, TNA must give Magnus his balls back. I'm Tazmark 2002, and that was my TNA Impact Analysis for February 20th, 2014. If you're listening to me on YouTube, please leave your comments below and click the like or dislike button. And if you subscribe, I would really appreciate it. If you're listening to me on the Wrestling News Talk Facebook page, please leave your comments below and click the like button if you like what I've been saying. If you have any questions or comments for me about TNA or wrestling in general, you can reach me on Twitter, Tazmark2002, that's TAZMARK2002. And if your comments exceed the 140, get at me with an email, Tazmark2002@gmail.com. And be sure to watch the TNA Impact review that I do with Chuck P live every Sunday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time on Chuck P's YouTube channel. If you can't watch us live, you can always watch the archive. And make sure to check out the other videos on Chuck's channel. Solid show. Solid show. The following is not a spoiler. because the news is on TNA's website and it's on their YouTube channel. This past Sunday night at a live event in Morgantown, West Virginia, the American Wolves defeated the Glorified Jobbers to win the World Tag Team Championship. It will be interesting to see how TNA will handle this with these last two UK shows that were taped a month earlier. And yes, some have criticized the move based on that, as well as the fact that it happened at a house show rather than on Impact or on pay-per-view. Some have said that the title change occurred because of the upcoming one night only pay-per-view with Wrestle 1, the Japanese promotion doing business with TNA, suggesting that the American Wolves would provide a better matchup for the competition. The important thing is the title change had to happen, regardless of why. TNA will never admit the mistake they made by putting the belts on a tag team that wasn't over. But for a tag team division that was previously dead for months, there is a heartbeat again. It's faint, but it's there. And it can get stronger if TNA allows it. I'm Tazmark 2002. Gone.